much turn it over to Billy Joe. The big topic is obviously the reduction in state aid. We've spoken a little about the impact that that's going to have on our budget, and that it's happening everywhere. It's statewide. It's not an OESJ problem. It's a statewide thing right now with the 20% reduction in state aid. So because she's more well versed on it than I am, we kind of turn it over to Billy Joe just to kind of give an overview of what's going on with this reduction and some of the things we're doing to address it.
As you know, we received our first check that was reduced. It was from 1920, a $300,000 payment minus our 20% reduction. So they reduced by $63,000. That's a big hit on a payment that we already budgeted for last year. So they have not declared whether or not it's a delay or an elimination. So we have to operate under the pretense that it is going to be an elimination. Can't spend money if we don't have it.
So that was in 1920?
It was 1920's budget, excess cost aid. So it would move forward.
So that would in essence lower the.
It will reduce our accruals.
Anything we had left.
Yes. So with that being said, knowing that going forward, they are not making any promises on this 20% that they're withholding right now, we need to adjust our spending and our long-term goals to kind of offset that until any federal aid comes to try and recoup some of that. And that has brought us to the idea of seeing if anyone is interested in retiring for an incentive. To get some of the higher paying teachers out on their own terms, really, versus, any reductions in staff at this moment. So we do have a few interested parties that would save us some money in the long term, and it would provide some immediate relief as well. We have two that we know of with serious intent. So the district savings immediate for that would be about $140,000 after the incentive. So it's a big, and that is operating under the idea that we don't replace them. If we don't replace them with new staff, but restructure with them. If we replace with new staff, outside staff, obviously we would have the hiring breakage, but you would be feeding into that savings. I don't know if any.
So there were two options. There was option one was a 20. Basically, it's explained here because they each took a different one. So option one was it was a $20,000 payout with an offer to have their health insurance remain at 15% for 1 year before it would then jump to the retiree contribution of 40%. The other one was $25,000 cash payout with 403B and no incentive on health insurance. But there are some contractual things for terminal leave pay and for days in excess of 200 that had to factor in as well because it's contract language for retiree. So again, I work closely working on the MOA incentive with the district legal counsel, and certainly because those things are contractual items, there was really no way to withhold them either. So they had to be factored into the incentive, couldn't say that it was part of what we were offering. It had to be in excess cash payout because they were contractual. But as you can see, it's still a nice cost savings.
How much does the retiree process happen to
As far, the biggest cost is with the health insurance. So the district would contribute 60% and the retiree 40%. So a family plan is roughly $24,000 for entire cost. So 40% of that would be covered by the retiree, 60% by the district.
So on average employee who's got 30 years, what are we talking about? Let's say a family.
Well, it's whatever, like we just went with Excellus, so it's our new plan. So it's the plan cost. So if you got, even if you said 20,000, 60-40 on that. So, 12,000, 8,000. That would be your breakage on those, what would they cover? Sometimes they choose to pay for dental afterwards, minimal cost, extremely minimal, couple $100. So that's the biggest cost when they retire. You see the biggest savings because when they're an employee, you're paying 10% TRS, 7.65% for FICA Medicare. Then you've got their dental and, you know, their hospitalization on top of that at the larger rate. We're paying 85% when they're employed. So that's 20,000 that the district pays usually. So, and you're talking about people with salaries about $85,000, a lot of them, when you're on the top stop.
So basically, I mean, there are short-term savings, but there's also, I mean, in the long run, there's actually even greater savings. So it certainly helps now, which is needed, and certainly what we were looking to do. But at the same time, there are long-term costs that are going to be greater than this, what's on this piece of paper. And obviously, when budget time rolls around in the spring for next year, these will certainly be factors that play a big part in balancing that budget. So they're both are short and long-term gains from these. And as of right now, there are no plans for the district to replace either of the retirees. So there'll be positions that are filled in-house and people will be moved around, certainly within their certification area to cover the retirees' vacancy. We feel comfortably in conversations that we can do that and not lose programs, and certainly not at a cost to the children's education. Now, again, losing two valued and longtime employees. So it's tough to replace, but we do have other very good employees in the district that can step up and fill those roles without having to post for the position and go out and hire a new employee. So the cost, the savings is a true savings, not replacing. And there were other number of different things, whether it was through people moving into new positions or people that were choosing to leave the district and resigning on their own fruition, or a position that we're not going to actually replace that we've had in the past, a few of them in different areas. There's about $135,000 savings there as well. So just under, but rounded up, call that another 135 there as well. So. As you all know, the letter I sent out Monday afternoon did two things. Did certainly tell the staff and to everybody in the district, in the Association of Professionals, that we were offering a retirement incentive. The details were being worked out. Obviously, those have been worked out. Those have been offered. That MOA has been signed. The other thing was the notification that there were possible reductions in force coming in the coming days or week. And what I would say at this time, depending on retiree incentive, basically is available until Friday for the MOA. So there is some time. I'm not sure if more people are going to come forward or not at this time. I do know there are other people talking, but I'm not sure to this point. And again, these two positions were not, but depending on who the person is, we would have to make a determination on whether or not we'd have to replace, which obviously if you replace, you still save, but you save less than if you don't. But there are certain people that could retire where we most certainly have to replace, so there would be a drastic loss of program or increase in class sizes, which certainly right now is more than ever isn't a possibility. So we would just have to do it on a case-by-case basis. It just happens in these two cases, we do not have to replace. But again, I'm kind of, part of this is wait and see, are we going to get anybody else that turns in a formal letter of resignation for the purposes of retirement, which can make us reevaluate where we're at as far as reduction in force. If not, then decisions need to be made about what we're looking to clear now as far as the number. And are those RIF notices going to be necessary? That's really where we're at as far as making those decisions. But I commend Billy Joe. She's been great, and she certainly has been speaking to other financial advisors that we work with. And some districts are choosing kind of sit tight and wait. And what words I hear, like there may be federal funding, and federal funding might come through, And, some people that have the interpretation that right before the election, the Republicans are gonna come through with money to boost their chances in the election, but we can't function as a district, and one that, certainly I've been in this seat for a very limited amount of time. But I can say that I think we've done a nice job, and I commend the board for how you managed your finances of the district. I'm not gonna sit around and recommend on mights and maybes and coulds. I think we need to function on what's best for this district financially in the short term, and we'll see what happens moving forward.
So
So,
tell me where we are.
Well, we are,
Actually, when you look,
we're
what we're
we're in
gonna
a
have,
good position at this moment, I'm not gonna lie. The idea is we can't maintain that if we don't have the money that we use to build the budget. So everything that we are doing right now is hinging on a 20% reduction. Whether that's long-term, short-term, or whatnot, it doesn't matter. They reduce 20%. You can't afford to keep people, which are a long-term expense. So that's what kind of is prompting this motion. We kind of knew it would be potentially coming this route if they did do the cuts that they're speaking of. Some people, like I said, at Schenectady School just rescinded a bunch of,
15,
And-
15 new
and
ones.
they put out really, their roof notices too. So it's coming. Some districts are choosing to approach it now with the idea that, we're gonna be operating with limited resources. The amount of cost that is associated with bringing students back in person is skyrocketing. All the PPE stuff and the requirements that you have, those items are unknowns, and they're big unknowns. So I think moving in this kind of way of trimming the budget is in complete response to the 20% reduction, not a reflection of financial distress in any way, a proactive movement.
no, I'm all for that.
And
I'm all
coming
for
off
doing
of
whatever we can.
1920, I know that's what you're gonna want to know, we're finishing everything with Weston Company currently. And we did have a larger fund balance than previous years due to the closure.
So with that in mind, is the 2.8 realistic? Do we have to make up the 2.8 gap?
Unknown. I'm operating under.
Are you operating on the assumption that we do?
I'm operating under the assumption that we're gonna have to, at this moment, at least make up probably about 500,000.
And where does that number come from? That's my question.
That would, it's an estimation based on the next aid payments that we would be receiving. So I know they just hit one for 20%. We should be getting one of those larger Gen aid payments that come kind of in that September range. So if you get that, it's over $1 million, 20% of that is 200,000. Then we usually start getting our building aid and things like that through there. The only ones I'm not really taking in consideration in my estimation is BOCES aid, an annual one that would come later on. And then some of the building aid that's associated with the new capital project. But they're all on the chopping block. That's the problem.
No,
They're
so my
talking about the-
question is, I think we ought to be thinking that the 2.8 is real
It most likely could be.
and go down that path. And if it doesn't materialize, we're ahead of the game.
Correct.
Because there's no guarantee that next year it's gonna be any better.
Correct.
Um,
Can I ask a question? The 20% number, when did they start, I remember, in the winter and stuff like that, they started talking about a 20% reduction. Was that back in like say, January when we were $6 billion in the deficit, or was that recently? Like
It was after COVID. It was after March. It was the April timeframe when they put out and froze some of the state aid money.
I don't think that, but I don't think that we're gonna be made whole, state's gonna be made whole at $18 billion. Federal government's not gonna make it whole. We're gonna come in some place, but it's not gonna be.
Right. It's not gonna cover the whole thing.
We might be closer to where we were at 6.
Right.
so tell me where we are with fund balance. What we have sitting around in various accounts.
I have done a quick update to the reserves, and some of these are tentative because we haven't finished completely with Mike Rossi. Is there anything in particular you're looking at? 'Cause I am looking to put some of that
Tell
additional fund
me-
balance.
Okay, tell me what is not have anything sitting in those reserve accounts right now that's already budgeted to be gone?
The only thing I would say is, no, not really, not completely to be gone, no.
I mean, not that the whole fund, no. We have
No.
any money right now that is budgeted. to
I
come
will
out
say
of-
that we have earmarked when we created the budget, last time it was 200,000 from ERS or TRS reserve towards the budget, and 200,000 from debt service. We did also allocate 200,000 from fund balance, the same 600,000 that went to the 1920 budget.
Okay,
So those would be earmarked for the
so
budget,
there's 600 grand.
correct?
Okay, so if you take the money, how much money, including what we have left over from this year, do you think we would end up with in a pot? That's what I'm looking at. You take all the reserve accounts plus the money left over, minus the 600 grand, what do we?
It's not a pot though, Dean, that's.
I know, I'm having a hard time trying to answer that question the way
It's
that
not a
it's,
lump
not gonna lie.
Well, I know it's not a lump sum, but the reason I'm asking is because the governor has given school districts the ability to utilize some of that money if they need.
Upon repayment,
Payment
That's the
within
question
5
I
years
have on
with
it.
interest.
you will repay it.
And I don't understand the interest. What interest?
It is in their writing that it would be, yes, you could borrow from these reserves, keyword borrow. It has to be repaid within 5 years at 20% each year plus interest. The interest line has not been determined how they calculate that.
We're paying interest to ourselves for our own money.
We're paying it back to those reserves. We're taking money technically out of the general fund to cover our borrowing of our own money.
It's ridiculous.
So that's not really something that seems conducive of us, especially if, yes, we might have money right now, but if you come around
So.
next year or the year
Let me
after in this
rephrase it.
situation.
If we had to get through this year, say 1.4 of that is our response. Given everything, given where we are right now, we could handle it.
I think we could. Not
With
ideal, but
what
we,
Adam's proposing,
moving in that direction, yes.
and
We
with
would be.
what we have left over from this year,
Yes,
with. All right, let me ask you one other question. Given all this stuff that's going on, obviously the way we did some of the budget with like busing, buying buses and stuff like that, not all of that was necessarily out of reserve, correct?
well, what we approved for this 2021 at this moment was, we approved
Everything was.
everything was passed for that. Nothing has been purchased for buses from the general fund.
Was there anything in that general fund that could have come out of reserve? That we just chose to leave in general fund?
We could choose to allocate more money from debt service towards our debt payments, but those haven't happened yet. That would be December and June. We have an insurance reserve if there was anything that we thought we could, a need there. Workers' comp, these are all smaller ones, in the broad scheme of things. The largest one would be your debt service.
The debt service one is probably the one we could utilize.
Correct, but every time you utilize it, it does have a bearing on our tax cap, and we do, that is low. So I would say if you were going to do it, you would not do it all in one shot, you would kind of phase it in 100,000 each year in a gradual manner. I would not, for the sake of the tax cap, do it all at once.
What's our projected cap for next year?
I'm predicting it being about the same, if not less.
What'd you say we collected on $18,000?
$18,299 was our increase.
Like around a year.
Yes. So it,
That falls off the table.
it could be until the aid and the debt start to level out and stream the other way. That's what's going to be. And I think at least on the Rick Timms model for the 5-year assumptions, which they're becoming solidified now with the payment schedules. Yes, you're looking at that for the next few years that I can see.
Let me ask you another question. Where are we with enrollment now?
Our projected enrollment is pretty close to last year. It's stagnant, if I would say that.
So
If
we're not
you're
gonna
talking
lose-
virtual versus in person.
But state aid is still the same,
Based
whether
on
it's
total
virtual or,
Yeah, even your remote learners are still considered students that are.
so it's not like we lost 100 kids that are just, you know, so we're losing all that state aid too on top.
It's more like 200,
Or like 200 we're losing.
no, remote learners. We're not losing them.
So what I'm saying is, you know, it's not like,
It is not penalizing us that they're choosing to go remote. We're still providing all the instruction and the tools available.
given the way everything is going, what do you see for savings in program costs? Whether it be because the sports schedules are different, you know, less busing, what do you see in savings because we're to offset some of the other costs?
Athletics are still up in the air, to be quite honest with you. The governor made the announcement that, you know, he said it was okay for sports to, in his position, to start on the 21st of September. But he also said it's up to individual districts or sections or conferences, or whatever it may be. So I know our athletic conference, the Western Athletic Conference, met today, athletic directors. And I know that section 2 is the section we're in, is meeting on Friday. So he said we could, but the caveat was, I'm saying you can, but if you don't want to, don't, basically. Kind of a pass the buck. And there's no final determination that's been made. So as of right now, where it stands, practices for fall sports may begin on September 21st. You know, high-risk sports right now for us, the only ones we would consider that would be volleyball. We don't have football. They start practicing, but there is no guarantee that they're ever going to be allowed to play a game. So they could practice for 4 or 5 weeks after school and never play another school. It's considered a high-risk sport. And there are certainly some parameters that I would sit here as a superintendent and tell you the rules we have to follow to run these athletics is concerning. Very difficult to pull off, almost impossible, similar to other safety protocols. There's a justification over where our phys ed teachers have to keep these kids 12 feet apart. Our, you know, music teachers have to keep kids 12 feet apart to play an instrument. Soccer kids are gonna go run around in the field and bump into each other. You know, and I have to limit the number of fans at the game, and then what do I do for bathroom? There's so many variables that it makes it hard to justify that you're going to run athletics when the rules that are being followed from 8 to 3 are a whole nother gamut. You know, it doesn't equate. So there's a lot of challenges. I can tell you that superintendents and athletic directors and building administrators are all kind of scratching their heads going, how is this even feasible? So I will tell you again, at this time, athletics in New York State are set to begin practice-wise on September 21st, but that is not set in stone. And, you know, while it may be unpopular for some parents to hear that, it's not a foregone conclusion that on September 21st, our sports are rolling. And it doesn't necessarily just have to be an OESJ. It could be regionally, it could be statewide, it could be, you know, a variety of different things, section-wide, which I would consider a region. So those decisions are yet to be made. I know that superintendents were asked for their input, and the Section 2 committee is supposed to meet on Friday to provide guidance or recommendations. I think I'm waiting patiently to see what those are before any action is taken. That's why you don't see any coaching appointments on the agenda, even though they start in 3 weeks. This doesn't seem something we should do until we're sure. So, other programmatically, I mean, the buses are still running daily. There could be a cost saving in sports. Again, there's conversations over what levels may be allowed, what levels might not be allowed. So there could be some savings there, but ultimately, the big scheme of things, it's pretty minimal. So then, other than that is extracurriculars. I've said it, I've told staff, and I sent the letter out that unless your extracurricular appointment is made official at a Board of Education meeting, that we're not to be doing anything with that group, considering that you're going to get paid. So unless it's prior approval from me and it's board approved, none of those should be commencing at any point in time, which means we're not paying those stipends. And the union is aware and they understand. They've been great about it, and I think the staff is understanding and aware. Now, some of them we may feel like for their student-run programs, we feel like we can still run with some kind of fidelity in the current educational environment. I would certainly advocate to have them approved, and that person doing it deserves to get the stipend. But we will not by any means be running that full list of extracurricular positions this year, whether it's athletics or other extracurricular. So there'll be some savings there as well. So,
The only other savings that I can think of that would be of a significant value is we did budget for a transportation supervisor. We're not gonna have one. We're going the dispatcher route. So that is a trade-off that we have there as well. And we also did not have in-person summer school. So that transportation that was budgeted for did not happen. But I say that cautionary because who knows what transportation is going to bring to us in the form of this hybrid transporting. So savings, but to be determined if it's really a savings in the
Do
long
you
run.
have a handle on bus routes and stuff?
I think the routes, they come down pretty solid. It's, your same factors. Can you keep the bus drivers, and make sure that you have enough of us? So, staffing is a concern in that on a good year. No one wants to drive a bus at this moment, and especially anyone with a health concern, too.
Did you do a questionnaire on parents who might be driving their own?
yes, yep, we did. And we have some good information, a lot of responses. And I know there's a letter going home tomorrow from our transportation department that has all the stuff on it, pickup times, drop-off times, bus numbers, all that kind of stuff. So that information is finally finalized. That can get out to families, and I know what's going up tomorrow. So,
I have a quick question to backtrack. Really, Joe, going back to having to borrow money from reserves and that 20% and just paying back, is that in all reserve accounts or is it only the ones that are designated for certain?
They've only approved certain ones, so one that they particularly talked about was your capital reserve, which you could utilize for something that you needed in the building, and a lot of it did reference for it to be COVID related. So, and I think that's why they tapped basically the capital reserve, because that would be for improvements, or say you had a bathroom that wasn't compliant, making that compliant.
Okay.
So it was not
You
a
would still
blanket
have to
cover.
borrow,
Yes, it would still have to be paid
or
back.
could you get voter approval and not have to?
That would be, your idea, it said without referendum. That would be just a decision made.
So what I'm
There's
saying
no
is,
type of
Correct.
account
Just to take from, no.
Not to pay that.
But you
Most
could with
reserves have to be
referendum,
used
could you
with
not?
referendum.
if we did a referendum vote to take money, we could take money basically from anywhere.
Well, now, it still is earmarked for specific purposes. So say you had a project you wanted to do that you wanted to pay for without having to borrow money or a smaller project. Sure, you could ask the taxpayers to vote for it, but it's still earmarked. They still fall into the SEP guidelines, you still may be subject to the whole process that we've done in the 24 million.
I think you're talking about though, like just keep the lights on. Or if you had a different to like a quick.
Right, if there was somewhere to go. The only thing I can say is we kept everything with the auditors at our 4%. We did not go above our unassigned.
In the percentage, the percentage you're talking about, that's not 20%, you have to pay back 20%
Of
annually
what you borrow plus it.
the following year.
Yes,
So if you're still in dire straits, what do you do then?
right. I don't know. I don't know if that means you get to forego it, but they're saying within that 5-year limitation, you should be back in full.
Well, you could do that.
Well, we're looking at fund balance that at this moment should be allocated elsewhere within those reserves. Because if we're gonna hit our 4%, that excess money that we came up with 1920 with, I'm gonna say, hey, with Mike Rossi, let's put our money into the reserves that we feel we needed it. It can't sit in there, or I'm gonna get written up, we're all gonna get written up with a management letter that says you're well over your percentage. It has to be allocated within a reserve. It's not gonna just be sitting there is the problem.
Yeah, I think that kind of brings us back full circle to, there's some things that are being done through attrition, which is the least painful, certainly, way to save money. I mean, I would say that there's many things that are being reduced through attrition that is potentially hurting anybody. And I can say right now, nothing that's been done to this point, nor anything that is a potential things we could do to address the money issue or just to open up some money right now would result in the cutting or the reduction of any program. It could result in an effect on a particular area for sure, but it wouldn't be an elimination. So it wouldn't be like you're eliminating a program or just eliminating business, for example. We're not going to say, oh, we have to make a reduction. It's going to result in the elimination of our business program. That's not going to happen. Any of the reductions that would take place, even if they were reductions in force that weren't through attrition, we would still have the program in existence from where it's being reduced. It will be affected. Of course it is. Whenever you reduce people in a program, it can affect it, but we're not going to be eliminating any programs. I think that's something important to know. But again, the question still remains. I mean, would you call it 280? From what we talked earlier, and the number you hear thrown around is 500. So the general determination is: do we feel the necessity and we have to get to 500 now, and that's a comfort level, and from a financial standpoint, and looking at everything we're dealing with, or where do we sit on that? I guess that's the big
I
question.
mean, what, in all honesty, what happened? You would just not have. You can't just pull money out of the sky.
Right.
Yeah. Well, you have excess in the budget. So if there's a shortfall of 200,000, if we do the 3 and then we don't need 5, shortfall 2. That would obviously be spread out across the whole budget.
Right.
So if you have money built in there anyway, there's excess. And you don't necessarily need, if you don't spend it 200,000, then you're not short. You
Yes,
understand what I'm saying?
yes. The only thing I'm gonna counter with, because I don't know what it's gonna be, our PPE costs are through the roof. I don't know what they're gonna.
Where would they even come out of?
Right now, they're coming out of buildings and grounds because they are for general building purposes. Masks, shields, all sorts of stuff. Some items are coming out of, say your nursing per building, isolation gowns, all this stuff, the thermometers, it's crazy the items that there are.
So, okay. We've already voted on the budget for this coming year. Because that could come out of what account could we pull that out if we had voted for it and put it in the budget?
Well,
Could it come out of?
you probably would have borrowed it from somewhere else. That's the problem. We're moving money within the budget. I hate to say it doesn't matter where it comes from. It's all coming from the same budget.
I know that.
Since it's in addition to our normal expenses is the concern. We may be able to overcome some sort of shortfall and things like that. We haven't even gotten operating, so we don't know what's to come.
So what I'm saying though is, are you allowed to move within the budget?
Within the budget, yes, with the board's approval, and so if I'm making a large transfer, yes.
Okay, so
Typically,
you
we do
could-
them at the end of the year, to see where we're at, but
But
yes.
throughout the year, if you see that, like building ground.
Yeah, you'll see where every so often I have, a transfer that has to be approved, that would fall into the same category. You can see a transfer between the budgetary lines.
Right, so you feel comfortable if we do just the 280 or whatever, that will be all right?
Unless there's someone else who comes forward with another, idea to want to retire. I think that we definitely should operate with those ideas. If someone's willing to go on.
Well,
there,
obviously, if there's
then
more savings to be had right now,
I think at
we should
this
probably
time,
take them,
yes.
correct?
As far as reduction in force, I have some other ideas to consider if we feel that. The 500,000 is a comfort zone, just knowing what's supposed to come next.
So even if we could get one more person,
It would,
that
yes,
would move you that much
You
closer.
know,
Yes.
helps, but
yes.
certainly we're only just over halfway to 500 right now.
What's anybody else, what do you think, Jack?
And I'm gonna throw this out there just for food for thought, because I did tell Adam this last time in March when we came to this stance and everybody was sent home, aides, TAs, bus monitors, bus drivers, everybody. The governor said we were required to pay them. So if we move forward and continue to have maybe an excess of those positions at this time, and we come to the same thing where we are shut down at a mandatory level, and we are required to pay them, we have no savings and no option at staffing, where our 70% of our budget kind of falls. So I hate to say that some of this feels like you're jumping the gun a little bit, but you might be until some aid comes in later from the federal government and then say, we can add something back. We may find ourselves in the position of wanting to do something proactively and then having to ask someone to come back at a later point, December, January, if that funding comes through. Because if that freeze comes on and we cannot lay somebody off, we cannot do those items, which the precedent had been set, I'm concerned of where I would find the savings to do it.
I'll say this about the whole budgetary process issue, is that no one's ever made a budget, and now had voters vote on a budget, have the governor say, it's okay, but the next 2 quarters, 3 quarters, I might just say, I'm not spending to 20%, but at that time, 20%, it's not 20%.
It's each time,
Yeah.
yes, so a compound.
So if you operate on the assumption that the guy has said that he's gonna cut possibly 20%, he's done it once, he's gonna do it again, and there's an election in November. And we already have we're already in a financial situation where we weren't in very good state as it is. It's been my history that whenever there's a chance to close a gap, that's where he does it. So the federal government and state government is not gonna make us whole. We might get to the point where, oh, it didn't turn out to be 500,000, and it turned out to be 400,000. At that point, that'd be great if we could do something to make ourselves whole again. But if we already spent $600,000 the last year and a half, and then we need another $500,000, reserves vanish. And I've seen it happen. They vanish in 3 years. They're gone. And you can't get your reserves back in 2 years. The governor doesn't come by and say, oh, you guys had $6 million in all these reserves, you spent them all, here's your state aid. No, it takes another 10 years. That's why when people were wanting their tax dollars back, or wanted this, wanted that, this is what it was for. The rainy days are coming, and here we are. And it's cyclic. It happens every 6 to 7 years, it seems like. So if we're wrong, great. If we're right, that's not great.
Just an air of caution, I'm concerned about that. If he says that again, I'm stuck. Anywhere else I can trim would probably come from necessities or impact student programs.
There's different viewpoints on that. Some feel like that won't happen again, and some feel like it very likely could happen again.
Nothing to say it won't.
Correct, correct. So this is all the air of caution, and I like that method because at least then you're in control. If I reduce and then I
I'm still
have the
concerned
excess
about,
to.
I'm still concerned about your 500,000. Because 500,000 only gets us to what date?
Through October is essentially the hope, 500,000, if those reductions come in kind of the method of payment, the way they come, they may be slower. And that's just kind of operating under the idea that a lot of people are putting out, they expect some sort of federal funding to fall through them. If it doesn't, that's why I'm saying the cautionary tale is maybe we should be reducing on the ancillary for that reason.
Because that's why I'm saying, I think the 500,000 actually is,
I'd hate to go
It's
talk
kind of like-
2.8 million
it's like
right off the
strong,
bat, just knowing
but-
that's 20% of that,
but
but
I think we need to have a plan in place
yeah.
that if that 20% carries through for the whole school year, then what do you do?
Right,
Well, this last.
That's what I'm trying to get to.
Yeah, the last 20% was on how much? 300?
300,000.
So, like you said, building native is $1.5 million, that's 20% on that, that's not a small amount of money.
No, that's almost your 500, that's over 300,000 on that
I'm
one.
telling you. They're- Balance this.
That's what I'm concerned about, that it's gonna have to be.
500,000 is the idea to buy time.
Yeah, and see, I don't think just buying time to get through October, we need to be thinking a lot longer term than that.
Long-term does include reduction of staff. Not saying it will affect programs, but long-term, in any event, when 70% of your budget is staff
Let me
and
just ask a question. Clarify something. And it has to do with this borrowing.
Mhm.
What do they consider repayment?
They haven't put any guidance out.
No, because the reason I'm asking, if we take money out of an account, quote, borrow it,
Mhm.
have fund balance left over and put it back in that account, is that repaying?
I would say if it's all done with board approval, it's no different than saying I'm gonna take 200,000 from ERS, put it in my budget, and I have left over and I put 200,000 back in, and that's all board approved each transaction. I would say it's deemed the same, but yes, you would have to give your 1 year's worth of interest, whatever that may
So
be.
what it is, the
I
interest rates are
know.
like nothing, they're
I
like
know, at 0.5%.
It depends, like I said, it depends on where the interest is going to though.
but that's why.
Right, I don't know,
That's why.
all they did was
because-
determine.
Because if we had to borrow, quote, borrow from these accounts, given our history with fund balance left over, I don't see a reason why there would be that much of a problem to pay that back just out of the fund balance left over. That's my question. That's what I'm saying.
In a normal year, probably. Big question mark on this one, though.
There is a big question, but I don't anticipate. I could see going a year, maybe two, with reduced funding from the state.
Mhm.
But I don't see how this funding, how this,
Well, I think we'll end up with a new normal.
I don't.
Like everything else
Yeah.
is the new
If
normal.
you end up with a new normal, it's 20% less than where we are, and it's just lights out all over the place.
There's a lot of other districts in a hard spot. The thing for me that concerns me is we're at a bad time for this to happen, not just in the world, but we're in like year 8 of merger rate. So imagine 2 years from now when that's done as well, in conjunction. So I think the
mean, you can't-
moves that we
you
make
can
now.
only, you can only reduce staff if you no longer have a viable school.
Correct.
I mean, you can do it for, you might be able to get rid of, some ancillary stuff, but you need a certain core, else you no longer have a school.
Correct.
So that's where I think long-term, we need to be thinking, maybe we can't figure it all out, but we at least need to be thinking that this is a multi-year thing. How do we get around it?
And my viewpoint is, if there's no way, anytime you're talking about reduction in force, it's a difficult conversation. I think we would all agree that we value every single one of the employees in our district. And so you're talking reduction in force, it's a tough thing to say, but there's different ways to do a reduction in force. You can do it in pieces and kind of do it strategically and the most painful. You can do it strategically based on trying not to lose programs, trying not to eliminate programs, even though you know that some are going to be affected, and do it piece by piece by piece. Or you can wait with that mentality like, we don't want to do it because it's a tough thing to do. We don't want to do it. And then all of a sudden we get to the point where like, not only do we have to do it, but we have to do it in extreme quantities,
Right.
which then would have this massive, all of a sudden impact rather than, it's always going to be impactful, especially to the individual, but rather than doing it in parts, and again, the village already mentioned it. If something changes and federal government comes through with money or something changes, there's always the option to bring the person back. I will sit here though and say that that would be done only after a conversation, because if the person leaves and the program that they left or the position that they left is functioning just fine, there'd never be a guarantee. It's not like if there's a reduction and you're definitely coming back if the federal government comes through with money. It would have to be something, if they came through, we'd have to then say, do we as a district feel that we need to bring this person back, or is that position functioning well without, or at least in a good enough spot without it, knowing that this is gonna happen again?
But the thing of it
That's
is,
the question.
I mean, I don't think that we've been operating with a lot of fluff.
I think we've done a good job, my time here, I think we've done a good job administratively and board-wise of not filling positions through attrition when we've had the opportunity.
That's what I'm saying, I don't
I can
think
say
we're
my former
operating with a
position
whole.
as the principal in the high school, I know there's been multiple times when somebody has left on their own fruition or via retirement, where we sat back and did a very, very good analysis of do we need to replace or not. So we knew if we did it, it wasn't just a knee-jerk reaction, it was done strategically, knowing we could maintain the program effectively. I think we've done a pretty good job of that in the district, but when things like this happen and tough decisions need to be made, I think this is where we need to sit down as an administrative team, as a superintendent myself, and determine where things can be reduced without causing an elimination of the program. So that as a district, we're maintaining the programs that we offer to our students and that we promise to our community. I think that's very important. But again, they're painful decisions and they're certainly going to affect individuals, and it's business.
I totally agree with that, but I only go so far. Before you no longer have. If you got 60 kids in a class, you're not going to teach that with one teacher.
And I agree, but unfortunately, we're sitting here in a situation where we know we have a deficit already that's occurring in through payments. We don't know what the future is going to hold. So the question is do you hold tight, or do you be, and I hate to say it, but be proactive and start to,
I have no problem with
reduce
being proactive.
some things in order to
Adam,
make us feel
don't
more comfortable.
misunderstand
No,
what I'm
I
saying.
know, I'm just saying.
I have no problem with being proactive. I have no problem with doing what we do. I have no problem cutting everywhere we legitimately. All I'm saying is there comes a point.
Absolutely.
And they're wrong.
There comes a point where you can't save your way. And,
Without losing programs, without having to cut programs or not offer athletics.
Are you gonna not
happens
offer
in
second
districts,
grade?
for example.
I mean,
No, I'm just,
it's my question,
Right.
that's what I'm saying, it's just two-way houses.
I think the best we could do is get to, if we, do what we can once we hit that wall. I think once we hit it for how proactive we're being, everybody else is gonna be
See,
in, almost every other
I
district
think
is
my
in the
question
same
really
with the
is, I
state
don't
aid.
want to, I think my question really is for you, is this 500 grand only gets us 200.
Correct,
So if we only do 300, that gets us through what?
probably the end of September, it's gonna be a little bit longer.
So then what do we do it then? Do we have another meeting? I mean, I'm dead serious.
Yeah. I know that we do have other items that we may wanna discuss beyond the retirement items. We are not unprepared with ideas and other avenues to explore beyond that. This is phase one.
yeah, and I would say, because the retirement incentive is available until this Friday, if more people take us up on it, or if there's a reduction in force outside of retirement and through attrition, that there would definitely be a need for another board meeting in the near future, like next week, to be able to take, there's no sense if you know you're gonna be making these decisions, they need to be made and they need to be approved, and again, while they may be painful, you need to make them and move on. There may be a need, depending on what comes in the next couple of days. If I don't get any more retirement incentives by the end of the day on Friday, question begs, are we going to reduce our force? No, well, they had it, originally I said, I'd be honest with you, originally I set the deadline for 2 days. I gave it 2 days, Monday to Wednesday. And after speaking with legal counsel and union, sake of fairness, to allow people to contact TRS and do it the right way, because it's not necessarily immediate, especially with COVID, I extended it to Friday. So they've known about this since Monday.
we do. Yeah. All right, here. We'll definitely talk to you.